All right, well, thank you everybody for attending. I think we see a few additional people coming in, so we'll start slow. My name is Eric Baker. I'm the Deputy County Administrator for Kitsap County. We really appreciate everybody being here today. This is the second of our comprehensive plan meetings. This one is going to be focused on land use and economic development. These meetings are really intended to kind of provide a brief presentation about varying components of the plan, what the comprehensive plan does, and what each of these individual elements might do. So tonight's meeting, this thing we'll move forward with for me. So tonight's meeting is going to include a presentation just a second, this is not the one I'm looking for here. Oh no, this is the one. I apologize. So we're going to do a brief presentation. By brief, it's probably going to run about 20 minutes, so that is planner brief. We're really going to talk about a number of things, including the targeted growth through 2044, zoning characteristics necessary to accommodate growth, and then we're going to move on to economic development. What really is the county's role in economic development, and what are some of the employment sectors and some of the wages that we're looking to achieve? This meeting is going to be different than the kickoff meeting that we had previous. This meeting is going to have the brief presentation at the beginning of it, and then we're going to break out into groups. Depending on how many people attend, we're going to look to have about 10 to 12 people per group. Each group's going to be kind of run through a series of questions about land use, about growth, about what the public is looking for as we go through the 2024 update on these topics. Each room will have a facilitator. So you don't have to pick which room that you're going to be in. The magic of the computer will select the room for you. When everybody goes to those, there will be a facilitator that walks people through. We're going to try to collect all the input that we receive, with the idea being that after the presentation and then after the breakout groups, we're going to have a report out where the facilitator basically covers some of the main themes that we heard in each of the breakout groups, so that the folks who weren't able to be in any one of the breakout groups can hear kind of somewhat what the other folks have been talking about. Again, like all the meetings, this meeting is being recorded. The breakout groups are not. So the presentation and the report out will be. They'll be available on YouTube and located on the county website for people who aren't able to attend tonight to visit. If for some reason you have some kind of technical issue along the way, Alex Jarrett at ajarrett@kitsap.gov, so please take that information down, is available to try to help you through. She is not tech support necessarily, but she can definitely help you through the major Zoom elements. So with that, I think I'd like to introduce some of the key contributors, some of the facilitators for your breakout groups. So with that, let's start with Jim Rogers, who is with the Department of Community Development.
Hello, hopefully you can see me. I can't see myself. So yeah, I'm Jim Rogers with Community Development. I've been with the county for almost a year now.
And Colin Poff.
Hi, my name is Colin Poff. I'm the Long Range Planning Supervisor. So I've been with the county for a couple of years and will be pretty heavily involved with the comprehensive plan update.
Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Shoemake. I'm a senior planner in the Long Range Division. I've been with the county for about a year and a half.
And Kirby.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kirby Mesablu Yobek. I'm the Environmental Programs Planning Supervisor at Department of Community Development. I've been with the county for almost 8 years. Thank you.
Excellent. And I am definitively the gray hair, as I've been with the county for more than 30. With those introductions, I also want to indicate that Commissioner Rob Gelder is in the audience. He's very interested in hearing what the public has to think on a number of these topics that we look at today. And again, he and the other Board of County Commissioners are very invested in the comprehensive plan update. So I want to thank Commissioner Gelder for being here tonight. So if I'm going to not experience any additional technical difficulties, I'm going to turn this over to Colin Poff, who's going to walk through some of the introductory elements of comprehensive planning, regional planning, and our residential zones.
Thanks. So just to kind of get started, I'm going to present the first portion of this presentation. Again, it's a brief presentation, and just to provide some higher level information, a little bit about the planning framework that we're working in. Some of this was discussed at our last meeting, and then get a little bit into the land use element that we're talking about. Land use in the county, growth targets, and different land use designations that we have. And then after that, we'll go back to Eric, and then we'll have the breakout rooms. But this slide that you see here is one that, if you were at the general meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago that we presented, and it just kind of shows the hierarchy that we plan in from the state to the regional to the local level. So GMA, that acronym up top, very important to the work that we do. It's the Growth Management Act. And most cities and counties in the state plan under the Growth Management Act, and has key guidance to and key directives for the planning that we do. So that's statewide, but here in Kitsap, we are in a 4-county region. That's the Puget Sound region. So those 4 counties are Kitsap, Snohomish, King, and Pierce County, and that's overseen by the Puget Sound Regional Council. So the Puget Sound Regional Council has a document that's called Vision 2050. And this is a guiding document that we are planning under that establishes population and employment targets all throughout those 4 counties, from Tukwila to Bremerton to unincorporated Kitsap County and our rural areas. It has population targets out through the year 2050. And again, those are targets. So those are not projections, but they are growth to be aspired to throughout those different areas. And it's a regional growth strategy. And there's a logic to that as well, because Puget Sound Regional Council holds the purse when it comes to transportation funding. So it makes sense to have know where land use is going and where population and employment is going to get the bang for your buck for those transportation investments as well. So that's Vision 2050. Going down the list to countywide planning policies, that's here for Kitsap County. And those are put together by the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council. That's a group of people from the county and from various cities. And actually those people sit down in a room and kind of do some trading when it comes to growth targets and where some of that population and employment growth will go. So we adopt those growth targets for how much growth will go in, Bainbridge, Poulsbo, unincorporated Kitsap County, rural areas, et cetera. So those, by the time we get to this comprehensive plan update that we're doing and updating our land use element and looking at land use designations, a lot of this has already been kind of worked out. So we have these adopted countywide planning policies and growth targets. It's important to understand that we need to have consistency with all of these things, from the state to the regional to the local level. Next slide, please. So again, let's backtrack a little bit again and talk kind of about the bigger picture, going back to GMA, or growth management. Growth Management Act was passed in 1990. There's many core concepts that we live by with the Growth Management Act, but it was established to avoid some of the negative impacts that were associated with unfettered growth. And so one of those core concepts is the divide between urban and rural areas. And that is because avoiding sprawl is an important thing. Sprawl can be kind of defined as, not dense, but not rural development, maybe 1 to 2 dwelling units an acre that moves further and further out, usually not as financially viable, or a little bit more of a financial liability, and also can encroach on resource lands and rural character, rural lands, and things like that. So we have the split between urban and rural. Urban being defined as being focused for an area where growth is focused, more dense housing, and more proximity to jobs and shopping and urban services. Rural being defined as areas that are more protected from growth, larger properties, rural employment opportunities, limited commercial development. And then lastly, the Growth Management Act requires us to plan for resource lands. So those are lands that don't have residential or commercial development. Resource lands are timber, agriculture, or mining. We don't have as much large scale agriculture in Kitsap County. There's obviously timberlands and some mining overlay. So those are the three main that we're looking at. Here's a slide just on growth. As we know, growth is all but guaranteed for Kitsap County. And so we have, we plan out for the next 20 years. So when this is adopted in 2024, we're looking at growth targets through the year 2044. And again, that's based on the regional growth strategy for the whole Puget Sound region that I discussed. But here in Kitsap County, we're looking at 70,000 new residents and 46,000 new jobs. And that growth is primarily going to be focused in cities, existing urban areas, and also the unincorporated areas of Silverdale and Kingston. And there is a small portion of that that would be allocated towards rural, but it's generally going to be, the lion's share is going to be urban, and you'll see a trend towards the division of the percentage of growth going to more towards urban and less towards rural. The next slide shows the countywide planning policies that we are adopting. Again, this is these are growth targets, population targets that are adopted by the Kitsap County Coordinating Committee. And here on the right-hand column, you'll see where those 2044 population targets are. And then you see all the jurisdictions and where they're at, and the growth that would need to occur to reach those targets. And obviously some jurisdictions have further to go than others, but that's why we have this comprehensive planning process. We also, when we do comprehensive planning, we have something called a land capacity analysis. So actually each jurisdiction will look at the available area for development, the zoning that, how much capacity that actually has for population and employment growth, and where there are gaps between the capacity for growth and what's where those targets are. Measures are usually taken to kind of bend the curve towards in the right direction towards these targets. So that's important to understand as we look at various land uses and densities and things like that. And then kind of the last concept here before we talk about some of the specific zones or land use designations is the concept of urban growth areas. We talked about the importance of kind of the urban and rural divide. There are existing urban growth areas throughout the county. You would look at the capacity within these areas, but they need to be properly sized for that 20-year planning period. And typically the urban growth area boundaries do not change much, but it is something that's looked at in the comprehensive planning process. And you look at the land uses or the land use designations within those urban growth areas and some of the impediments to development within those land uses as well. The urban growth areas there's actually a geographic boundary, and typically urban means that they have urban services. So that would mean sewer, sidewalks, bike lanes, regular transit, multifamily housing, urban amenities, and things like that. And typically, each new housing development that's built or housing unit that's built in an urban area, the idea is that there's existing infrastructure there to support it, and it's less, again, of a financial liability to provide that. Whereas new development in rural areas or areas that don't have those services, it's much more difficult to provide those services. And so we'll go through some of these specific zones. These are the urban residential zones that are within those urban growth areas. The most common of which is the urban low or UL zone. That's the most common throughout the urban areas in the county, which is one of the lowest density urban zones, a minimum of 5 dwelling units per acre to a maximum of 9 dwelling units per acre. And those areas are going to be serviced by sewer, or sewer is required. That second middle picture is, I believe, depicting 5 dwelling units per acre, whereas down on the bottom is depicting 9 dwelling units per acre. So that's what you can see of a typical, somewhat dense kind of single family development typically. We also have urban cluster residential, cluster meaning similar densities, 5 to 9 dwelling units per acre, but those residential units would be clustered to preserve open space or to preserve existing topographical or environmental features. Next, we do have, on the next slide, we do have one called urban restricted. This is a little bit less common, but it is a lower density urban zone, 1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. And this is the only zone, well, except for greenbelt below, but different from urban low, where sewer is actually not required, that some of these areas will actually be serviced by septic. And those are lower densities. Often they have streams and wetlands on site and things like that. So that's why you would see urban restricted in some areas within urban growth boundaries. Next is greenbelt. That's in Illahee. Also, I believe 1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. It might include some shoreline areas. Next in the urban areas is urban medium, 10 to 18 homes per acre. You might have heard before the term missing middle housing. This is where at urban medium, like urban low is more of your more dense single family development. Urban medium is where it makes some sense to have some of those other housing typologies, such as townhomes, row houses, low rise multifamily, so 2 and 3 story multifamily buildings. And then you start to see also some of those more kind of urban amenities that come along with that kind of development and increased walkability and reduced parking requirements. And lastly is urban high. So that's a minimum of 19 dwelling units per acre to 30 dwelling units per acre. So these pictures kind of depict more of your typical apartment buildings, medium rise multifamily, also mixed use in this area. So vertical mixed use with commercial on the ground with residential above. And these areas being a little bit more dense, you might see some common areas or common green spaces and amenities. So that covers a lot of those urban categories, and I'll go back to Eric to keep discussing some other land uses.
All right, so those are predominantly the residential uses that you'll see. What we're looking at here now is moving into some commercial uses. Commercial uses, of course, are not all considered equal. Some are smaller in intensity than others. We start with neighborhood commercial. That is a designation that allows small scale retail and office, convenience and neighborhood oriented type uses. So convenience stores, restaurants, small services, bakeries. One of the places that you're going to see that type of designation is in the small commercial areas like in Ridgetop, or also Old Town Silverdale also has a neighborhood commercial. Then you have the more general commercial designation. This is a designation that covers places like the trails, State Route 303. So as you're driving up from Bremerton towards Silverdale, where the Walmart and Fred Meyer, those are. You're looking at some more moderate commercial uses. These are more vehicle oriented. So you're going to see more espresso stands, more fast food restaurants, grocery stores. Again, it's meant to serve the traveled public. There's also portions up and around Silverdale, up by the trails, that are also designated commercial. And then we have our biggest commercial designation, which is regional center. That's pretty much downtown Silverdale. Downtown Silverdale is where big box retail like Lowe's is intended to locate. That's where the mall is. Also institutions like our brand new hospital. There's also a certain amount of mixed use that is encouraged. So while commercial is a good component of everything that we see here, it is also intended to allow for a significant amount of multifamily housing. The idea of people living and working and shopping all within the same area. So while this is the area where we have the largest commercial focus, we also are looking to expand residential uses in this zone. And again, this is downtown Silverdale we're talking about. So then moving into a couple of the other uses, obviously there's some industrial uses, other employment outside of retail and services. We're talking about manufacturing, warehousing, more intense uses. You're going to see some heavy manufacturing like you see there in the image. And then you got business center, which is located more around business parks, technology related uses, clean industry. Now, if you look there at the map that is on the right, that is the Greaves Way Trails area. As you see moving to the north, there's still a good amount of commercial, which is the color in red. And then when you're looking at the brownish color, that's business center. Again, with the idea being that shopping and employment are located close to one another. Moving out to the rural areas, you're looking at a lot less density. Like we mentioned before, that rural areas are supposed to be protected from future growth. We're supposed to limit the number of people who are moving out into the rural areas, instead concentrating themselves in places like Kingston and Silverdale and our cities. So in rural residential, we have a series of different lot sizes, but they're all residentially oriented. You have rural residential, which is our largest rural zone, which has 5-acre lot sizes. Rural protection, now we're looking at 10-acre lot sizes. These are largely located around stream or wetland systems. So when you're looking around Big Beef Creek, Big Valley Road, or Big Valley, those types of areas all have this kind of designation. And then you have the rural wooded zoning, which is 20-acre lot sizes, our largest rural zone, that really is focused on places that have small-scale forestry or a history of small-scale forestry. But as we all know, in the rural area, we have a lot of lots smaller than 5, 10, and 20-acre lots. This is the zoning for any kind of new subdivision. We have a series of existing lots. They're all not called non-conforming, which means that they can continue to develop in their current sizes, but we aren't allowing anyone to break them up into smaller than 5-acre sizes in the future. So again, the 1 acre, the 2.5-acre lots, not really able to be any new ones to be created beyond the ones that existed pre-1998. So moving out into rural employment, we do have some employment opportunities that are located in the rural areas. You'll notice a lot of them along Bond Road and at the intersection of Bond Road and State Route 104. Strebel's Corner, also as you go up to 12 Trees off Pioneer Way. These are, again, intended to be focused on rural needs. Talking about small manufacturing, office, some supporting retail. You also have rural commercial, which oftentimes is a lot of historic, isolated commercial uses. As you're driving up State Route 3 towards the Hood Canal Bridge, you're going to see small convenience stores that have been there pre-GMA. The rural commercial is intended to reflect those and also intended to serve the rural community. And then rural industrial, much like rural commercial, these are historic uses that predated GMA that are small, isolated uses located out in the rural areas. Then lastly, we have resource. Resource uses are pretty much just forest lands and mineral resource. Forest resource is pretty much on Green Mountain, where the Department of Natural Resources owns the land. And then mineral resources, which are small pieces kind of throughout the rural area that is focused on existing mineral permits. So if they have a permit from the Department of Natural Resources to extract gravel or rock, these areas are usually the ones that are designated mineral resource. So some other major zones that are of key importance to a number of individuals: the Urban Village Center Zone, located in downtown Kingston. This is a mixed use zone, so it allows commercial and allows medium density residential. And then you may note that as you're out in the rural areas, I've talked about Kingston, I've talked about Silverdale, but what about places like Manchester and Suquamish and Keyport? They feel urban, but they are actually out in the rural areas, and they're part of some planning acronym called LAMERS, Limited Areas of More Intensive Rural Development. They are rural, but they do have urban services, and they do have the ability to maintain a more urban setting, similar to as they were pre-GMA. So you look at what the development pattern looked like in 1990, and for places like Suquamish, Manchester, and Keyport, you mimic that. So those are the only areas that are largely different than, again, that 5, 10, and 20-acre zoning that you saw previously. So I'll skip through that to save time. I'm now going to move on to some economic development. One of the questions we have is exactly what is the county's role in economic development? There's so many different components that work with economic development. There's the market. There's exactly what kind of businesses are looking here. This is also oftentimes the core mission of our port districts, who are largely focused on economic development and providing land that is available for industrial, commercial, and business uses. Where does the county kind of fit into that? As I mentioned before, there's a strong private developer component. People want to move in here to produce items or provide services based upon our location, based upon our resources. The private entities have a lot of control over that. What employment sectors are we really trying to achieve? We're obviously looking for family wage jobs. So obviously there are good roles for retail and service provision in our commercial areas. But when we're talking about paying $30, $40 an hour or more, what are the types of jobs and what types of sectors does that fit into? And then should we focus more on retention and expansion of our existing businesses, places like Safe Boats that grew up here? Or should we really be focusing a lot of our efforts on bringing in businesses from nationwide, internationally, or other places in the Puget Sound to locate here in Kitsap County? Exactly where is that sweet spot for the county's role when we're dealing with economic development? Some of the employment sectors that we have focused on in the past have been advanced manufacturing. So obviously we have a strong Navy presence in Kitsap County. We have the nuclear subbase, we have the nuclear shipyard, and we have the Keyport underwater warfare. We have a lot of high-tech military-related businesses that our private sectors are looking to leverage. So we're looking at some maritime original equipment manufacturers in aerospace, clean technology, architect and engineering services, research and development, energy distribution, potentially down at the Port of Bremerton, around the Bremerton National Airport. And then obviously with the brand new hospital in Silverdale, healthcare is a key element. Like I mentioned, the US Navy is our largest employer and is kind of the foundation of our economy here in Kitsap County. Then a standard regional retail, construction, business services, food processing. And then another question is, where does tourism fit in? We have a lot of folks who are coming through Kitsap County to the Olympic Peninsula to recreate in an outdoor manner. How can we stop a number of those folks along the way to stay here in Poulsbo, Port Orchard, enjoy the Port Gamble Forest Heritage Park's mountain biking ride park? How do we keep those dollars in Kitsap County and fuel a lot of the service provision related to hospitality and tourism, the sectors that got hit really hard in the COVID times? So what's our past role been per our comprehensive plan? Our main role is to ensure that we are zoning adequate land for businesses to locate, and that those businesses have adequate infrastructure, roads, sewer, electricity, to be able to develop. A lot of that industrial land is located down now in the city of Bremerton at the Puget Sound Industrial Center, Bremerton, which is located again by the Bremerton National Airport, where we're expecting a lot of employers to locate. We have some in Silverdale, we have some in East Bremerton, Bremerton proper. Port Orchard has both the Port Orchard Airport, which is located in the county, but also has the Port Orchard Industrial Park. We need to make sure that we have enough land, that land has necessary infrastructure for businesses to locate. We also need to coordinate between the cities. Note there that I mentioned a number of the cities in this economic development. Kitsap County, in establishing its role, needs to understand exactly where it fits with all the other jurisdictions that are also trying to provide economic development to our community. And then we want to maintain the quality of life in the community. So we're looking at ensuring that all the qualities that we love about here, that employers find attractive, and they want to move here so that their employees can enjoy that quality of life as well, so they can, as you see from the other bullet point, utilize an experienced workforce that Kitsap County, Olympic College, the Western Washington Extension are trying to foster here in Kitsap County. This isn't just 2- and 4-year institutions. This is also technical and vocational experience, ensuring that we have folks that are able to work a wide variety of jobs to be able to bring in businesses. So we said a lot of words, ran about 9 minutes over. I apologize for that. But as I promised, this isn't just us talking. What we're going to do is we're going to go out into breakout groups. So you're all going to be assigned, let's see, how many folks do we have in the audience? Looks like we have about 28 individuals. So I think probably we're going to have about 2 to 3 breakout groups. One of the staff that you've seen here earlier is going to do kind of the facilitation. We have a few questions that we want to ask individuals, and we want to be able to take notes on the comments that we're receiving on a number of issues regarding land use and economic development. When you get into the breakout group, and they'll summarize all this when you're in there too, please keep your mics muted. And if for some reason you find your mic getting muted, that is the facilitator. We want to make sure that the background noise doesn't get in the way. If you have a comment that you want to raise, please use the raise hand function, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And please, if possible, only participate while you've been unmuted and you've had your hand raised, so everybody has an opportunity. This isn't really just an opportunity for everyone to talk. We would like some back and forth, but we do want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity and that conversations don't get dominated by one or two people. So we really appreciate you trying this out. This is relatively new for us. We would normally do this around a table at the Kitsap County Administration Building or some other public space, but we're going to try this virtually so more people can attend. So with that, I believe Alex, who is hiding behind the county logo here on the screen, is going to send everybody off to their breakout groups. So thank you again. Thank you for coming. Yes.
Would you like we have 26 participants, including the staff. Would you like just 2 breakout rooms?
2 would be fantastic.
Okay.
So we're going to go with 2 breakout groups. After the breakout groups are concluded, please don't run away. We are going to have report outs. So since we only have 2 breakout groups, there's only going to be 2 report outs. The facilitators are going to take down the main themes from the notes that we received. Also, all the materials that we received from these breakout groups are going to be included on the website and going to be included for other folks who weren't able to attend tonight. Alex, do we have any other questions before we all go off into the ether?
I don't believe so. I have you, Colin, and I'm trying to figure out who our other co-host in a different room.
Kirby? Melissa?
Looks like we're missing Jim, so perhaps he's in a room already.
Jim, give me just 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Not a problem at all. This is our first time. Technology is a little on the challenging side.
Move 2. I need to move Kirby. I'm going to move you to room 1, Kirby. Just want to make sure I have enough staff in each room.
Yeah, don't worry about it too much. As long as we got 1 or 2, that's all we need.
Okay, I can always jump people
Sounds great.
over. I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms and I can move people over.
Thank you.
Go ahead and chat with me if you need to.
All right, looks like we're all slowly returning. We hope the other room had a good discussion. I know ours did. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So with that, I'm going to allow my group to report out, basically talk about some of the things that we heard. We definitely weren't able to even touch half the questions we wanted to talk about. So we really appreciate everybody participating and in an active discussion of some of the questions that we did reach. So with that, Colin Poff, do you want to kind of give a summary of what we heard in, I think we'll call it group 1.
Yeah. So
Eric, give it 1 more second, please. I think we have some people still filtering in.
Okay, I apologize.
Thank you. Thank you.
I apologize for jumping the gun.
I think a lot of people are getting back. We'll just maybe give it another 30 seconds or so and I can give a summary.
Not a problem. Alex, let us know when you think we have critical mass.
I believe we are at critical mass. Take off.
So with that, Colin Poff, tell us about group 1 and some of the main themes that came from our discussion.
Sure. So I think both groups, we had the same questions, but obviously there wasn't time to get to every question. I assume maybe it was the same with the other group, but the topics or the themes did touch on a lot of the themes that we wanted to talk about or the other questions that we had. So the first question that we asked is, how is growth affecting Kitsap County, which is a fairly broad question, but can touch on a lot of different things. And we had a lot of good points that were brought up during that. So how is growth affecting Kitsap County? Well, first, we talked about how is it in the last 10 years, since the last comprehensive plan update. Well, there was, we were coming out of the early parts of the recession and there wasn't a lot of building. But obviously there's been quite a bit of development in recent years in Kitsap County. And there is some discussion about as that growth has occurred, that not all of it was positive. There's some negative in terms of the development itself, maybe not growth itself, but the development that you see not being as thought through as it could. There's discussion about tree removal being a big issue, less regard for the neighborhood or the surroundings of that development going through. So just a comment about being more thoughtful with development, not necessarily less growth, but more thoughtful. Of course, there's a lot of discussion about infrastructure and whether or not there's enough infrastructure. We've seen a lot of development continuing to occur, for example, around schools, while those schools are above capacity. Same thing with traffic and parking, those things being kind of above their capacity, but development continuing to occur. Again, growth itself kind of having an effect on quality of life, something to consider. I think people have a characterization that Kitsap used to feel more rural, that the pace has changed. So something that's indicative of that is the tree cutting and reduced privacy, those kind of things that have impacts to quality of life. More traffic. There's a talk about roads having kind of blind approaches to driveways and more traffic having effects on pulling out of those driveways, for example. And just questions in general is, if we had the topic of 70,000 more people coming to Kitsap County, how will infrastructure support all of that growth, which is of course the exercise of comprehensive planning. Where will that growth go, and why it makes sense to concentrate in certain areas over other areas that are well suited for growth. And then lastly, and this touched on one of the other questions that we didn't get to, was the question of livability. So when you go vertical with construction, so more high density or apartment buildings and things like that, how can that be more livable? So example would be, we've seen large parking lots where you don't have any trees, and why are we not requiring at least some more parking lot trees, things that provide shade and reduce the heat island effect, things like bike paths and stuff like that. The next question, or the only other question that we asked in the land use part, was what infrastructure should be provided? Well, with development, it's important to balance not just infrastructure, but also the needs of people, but balance needs of the environment. So that would be things like considering, again, trees, removal of trees, and water quality. There's some areas that are pinch points or difficulties with transportation, for example, difficulty going north on Highway 3. And so considering how housing is important, but how transportation and housing must go together. So there's a need with Highway 3, that's a state highway. So the need to coordinate better with any agencies like the state, for example, that provide capital improvements, and how those capital improvements will go with new housing. And then it's important to have this, new infrastructure or shoulders on roads and things like that, but need to understand that those have impacts again on the environment, water quality. More pavement could have impacts on water quality and things like that. There's a couple more here. One, infrastructure was transit and the ferry system, not just transportation within Kitsap, but access to Seattle is an important part of Kitsap County. And also improvements to just public transportation in general. And then lastly, internet infrastructure and the importance of, the increasing work from home trend and need for having internet infrastructure to, support the changing economy. Then move on to kind of a summary of what we talked about with economic development. The first question was, what kinds of jobs or employers should Kitsap be promoting? There was a lot of talk about opportunity in Kitsap for jobs. There's a lot of new types of jobs with changes in energy, climate change, different work preferences that people have. So more work from home, different work habits and desires and things like that. And having in our plan ability to be flexible so that we can be a leader in those things that will come new industries. And since we're kind of at a changing point with a lot of things. Again, the county, there's talk about how the county is diverse and can accommodate a lot of different types of jobs. The Navy is our biggest employer. There will be a lot of maritime jobs, Navy jobs, but Shouldn't necessarily just focus on that and diversify our business base, talk about cottage businesses, small farms, and things like that. Also, when we talked about maritime jobs, there's a comment about, well, we also have the unique opportunity to have a lot of shorelines and critical areas. And so we should take advantage of that by being a leader in kind of the green economy with things like restoration and improvement of those areas to demonstrate that our economy is balanced between, that type of economic development and also green jobs and environmental enhancement. And of course, healthy foods, permaculture, green economy, things that are important for young people, those and that kind of diversification. And then lastly, tourism was the other question for how is tourism important in our growing economy? We have strong potential in Kitsap for tourism. The issue that people talked about is lack of enough infrastructure to handle large scale tourism. So big events and festivals, and be thoughtful of the impact that has on local residents. Also be thoughtful of the impact that vacation rentals would have on local residents. So there are some mixed feelings there, but there's also just a lot of opportunity for tourism to be part of our economic strategy. Those tourism creates soft dollars. So don't necessarily have to build any new structures for tourism, but yet you get people coming in, money to help local restaurants, and et cetera. So that was a very quick summary of what we talked about in group one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So for group number 2, Melissa, Kirby, someone want to report out?
I know both of us took notes, but I was the one who had them up on the screen. So the first question, how is growth affecting Kitsap? There was a lot of concern about congested roads, how that impacts lack of sidewalks for pedestrians, shortage of housing, and the pressure on housing needs and how that is balanced with the environmental concerns, and also the lack of housing diversity countywide. Which communities are best suited for additional growth? The only real clear answer we got on this one was upzoning near transit hubs, including park and rides. The other feedback was that it's actually kind of hard to answer this without knowing what the capital facility plans and utility capacities are, where they're adequate, where we should target capital improvements. And also feedback that they actually don't think that the targets that we're working towards are enough, and that we need additional support above and beyond what the targets are saying that we're developing at. That was particular to Kingston. Thoughts about increased density included increase in light pollution, and that also has impacts to the environment and concerns about misuse of sensitive areas. Folks who wanted some mixed use where there's cooperative living with the option for live work. Density should be properly placed near schools, economic hubs, services, and healthcare. So again, kind of getting at that mixed use kind of idea. Commercial on the ground floor with housing above, which is more walkable and more bikeable, and building up instead of out. Also, increased density leads us to infrastructure issues. The recent sewage treatment spills into the Sound were brought up. And then a concern about the UVC zone in Kingston, where mixed use is no longer required, but is only recommended. And then we skipped down to economics after that. Talked a lot about what kinds of jobs or employers should Kitsap be promoting. A need for more socioeconomic or socio-emotional support, including more nonprofits, as well as needing trade schools and other educational needs. Wanting to encourage students to go to college instead of just working at the shipyard, and there should be more professional jobs locating here that would bring those students back after college so that they actually see that there are other job options than the shipyard. There's a lack of skilled tradespeople, lack of childcare and daycare. So that impacts both workers as well as, that is actually a sector of economic jobs. how do we promote what jobs are employers? What are we doing in the future? Are we working with CADA or the ports? Should give more thought to green technology. That was specifically about installation and promotion of green technology, but also potentially about manufacturing. Suggested virtual tourism so that we don't actually have the environmental impacts of folks coming here for tourism. Small businesses that are concentrated in downtowns are tourist draws. The example was Polsbo. Also farm to table restaurants, basically businesses that are connected to the people who live here. And there was mention that Olympic College can help fill those gaps and that there's a workforce shortage in basically all sectors. What obstacles? Definitely housing was a big one. Finding workers, especially educated in the right field. And there was some discussion about how do we grow businesses within Kitsap rather than bringing in outside businesses and including business incubators. And then because we had sort of talked about tourism, we skipped to strategies to promote redevelopment of existing commercial areas. And so that looked like folks just sort of suggested incentives. So I asked for a little bit more specific. So that looked like not doing frontage improvements when redevelopment of a site occurs. So, you know, it's not greenfield development. Fast tracking permitting, especially if it's a mixed use development, where there's, again, that commercial on the ground floor and housing above. Partnerships to potentially get redevelopment done, and clarification that they did not want tax incentives. So that's as far as I got.
Well, thank you guys very much. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. Again, the next meeting will be, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, I believe September 27th.
Correct.
At 6 p.m. It is, the Zoom link is located on our webpage. Again, all this information, including the report outs and the video, will be on the webpage. So please, for anyone who might be interested, please send them to the webpage and they can watch the presentation. They won't be able to see the breakout groups, but they will be able to see the report outs, and we will be putting all the notes that we took from these. These types of conversations are incredibly helpful. They really kind of help us kind of see exactly how big the breadbox of issues we have in the county are, as well as helping us prioritize certain things that we need to analyze very closely in the environmental impact statement. So thank you very much. Again, September 27th, 6 p.m., we're going to be talking about housing, affordable housing, and housing affordability. So we look forward to seeing you then. And if you have any questions, please contact us at the numbers and emails that you see on the screen. Thank you very much this evening, and we hope to see you soon.